He thought he was walking back into a home, but what he stepped into what felt more like a stranger's museum. Darius Whitfield's jet had landed hours earlier than planned, and for once he didn't send word ahead. No text to his driver, no call to the house staff. Just one instruction when he climbed into the black Escalade at the airport. Don't tell nobody, just drive me home. Now, standing in the grand entry of his Atlanta mansion, he set his luggage down and loosened his tie. A man with skyscrapers in his name and seven-figure contracts at his fingertips shouldn't have felt out of place in his own house. But he did. The marble floors shined so bright they almost mocked him. Polished staircases curled upward like they were reaching for someone else's life. Every detail screamed wealth. Yet, to Darius, it all rang hollow. Let me ask you something. Have you ever built something you thought would bring you peace, only to realize it left you emptier than before? Comment yes if you know that feeling. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Darius last set foot here. His 11-year-old son, Malik, lived in these walls, cared for by staff. But when business calls came from Dubai, London, and New York, Darius answered, always. He told himself Malik was fine. Tutors, cooks, security. Everything a boy could need. At least, that's what Darius kept repeating to himself. He hung his jacket over the banister, trying to convince himself Malik would be thrilled to see him in the morning. The boy loved surprises, right? That thought brought a faint smile to his face, but before he could climb the stairs, something unusual stopped him. The house was too quiet. Not just quiet, dead quiet. If you've ever walked into a room and felt that stillness wrap around you, you know what I mean. The kind that makes you freeze because your gut says something's off. Then he noticed it, a faint light glowing from the back of the house, from the old library, his library. That room was his sanctuary, a place no one else ever touched. Not his assistants, not his staff. It held books from his hustling days, deals scribbled on napkins, and a picture frame of Jasmine, his late wife, that he never let anyone move. So why, at midnight, was that room lit? He moved quietly, his expensive shoes tapping softly on the polished floor. The closer he got, the more uneasy he felt. A faint sound floated out, like a voice, low and steady, almost like humming. Was someone in his house? A thief? Or worse, someone who thought they had the right to invade his personal space? Darius's heartbeat quickened. This was a man who had stared down million-dollar negotiations and ruthless competitors. But in that moment, alone in his own home, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Unease. He reached the library door. It was cracked open just enough for a sliver of light to escape. He leaned closer, straining to catch what was happening inside. That's when he heard it. Malik's voice. His son. But not playful, not cheerful. Crying. The sound jolted him. For 6 months he had told himself Malik was fine, adjusting, strong, but those muffled sobs said otherwise. And then came another voice. Softer. Older. A woman's voice. Words he couldn't quite catch, but they carried a rhythm. Almost like a prayer. Darius froze. Why was Malik awake at this hour, and who was with him? The hum of gospel words grew clearer, and Darius realized who it was. Miss Laverne, the maid. A woman he barely noticed most days, except for the way she hummed under her breath while polishing silverware. She was supposed to keep the house tidy, not invade moments like this. Now, in his library with his son at midnight, Darius's jaw clenched. What was happening here? That's the question I'll leave you with tonight, because when Darius pushed that door open and saw exactly what Miss Laverne was doing with his son, his entire world shifted, and it wasn't what you're thinking. Before we proceed, tell me this. If you came home unannounced and found someone you hired alone with your child, whispering to them in the middle of the night, how would you react? Would you thank them or fire them on the spot? Comment below. I'll be reading every answer. Most people think silence means peace, but in a house that big, silence can make your skin crawl. Darius stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the faint glow coming from the library. His library. The one place in this mansion nobody else dared touch. Yet here it was, alive, lit, and whispering with voices in the middle of the night. He should have gone upstairs. He should have checked on Malik, dropped his bags, and collapsed into bed, like every other tired businessman. But something in that glow pulled him closer. You ever get that gut feeling, like somebody's crossing a line that shouldn't be crossed? That's what Darius felt. And if you've ever trusted someone with your child only to sense they were doing more than what you paid them for, would you ignore it? Or investigate? Drop a comment. I'm curious how you'd handle it. His shoes tapped lightly against the floor as he crept closer. The air felt heavy, each step dragging him into a truth he wasn't ready to face. The closer he came, the clearer the sounds grew. A boy's voice, trembling, Malik, and then a woman's, firm, steady, almost like a melody. He leaned against the wall just outside the door, listening. Say it again, baby, the woman whispered. Malik's voice cracked. I miss you, Mama. Darius's chest tightened. Mama. Jasmine. Her name hadn't been spoken out loud in that house for years. Darius's hand curled into a fist. He wasn't angry at his son. No, his anger was aimed at whoever had stirred up this pain at midnight. His mind raced. What was Miss Laverne doing with Malik? Filling his head with things too heavy for an 11-year-old, taking liberties no maid should take? For a moment, Darius almost barged in, ready to end it. But curiosity held him back. He leaned closer, peeking through the small gap in the door. And what he saw froze him. Malik was on his knees, face streaked with tears, hands clasped tightly like he was holding on to something invisible. Miss Laverne knelt beside him. One hand rested gently on his shoulder, the other pointing upward as she whispered words that sounded like a prayer. Darius's heart lurched. He wanted to believe it was innocent, just comfort from an older woman. But another part of him saw danger. She wasn't family, she wasn't a pastor, she wasn't his wife, she was his maid. What right did she have to step into a role he'd reserved for Jasmine's memory? Now let me stop right here. If you walked in and saw this, what would you think? Would you see kindness or disrespect? Would you thank her for caring? Or see it as a betrayal? I want you to answer in the comments because this is the crossroads Darius stood at. Inside the room, Malik sobbed harder. Do you think Mama hears me? Miss Laverne's voice cracked, but she held steady. She hears every word, sugar. You just got to keep talking to her. Those words cut through Darius like a blade. For years he avoided these talks. He buried himself in meetings, flights, contracts, anything to escape the gaping hole Jasmine left behind. He thought ignoring it would protect Malik. Now here was his maid, dragging up the very ghost he'd tried to bury. He couldn't take it anymore. The man who faced billion-dollar deals without flinching suddenly felt like his chest was caving in. He pushed the door open. The hinges creaked, breaking the fragile cocoon inside. Both Malik and Laverne snapped their heads toward him. Malik's eyes widened, his face wet with tears. Dad? His voice cracked in fear and relief. Laverne rose slowly, her hand slipping from Malik's shoulder. Mr. Whitfield. Her tone wasn't guilty. It was steady, almost defiant. Darius's jaw tightened. He stepped into the room, his shadow stretching across the library floor. What exactly is going on here? The air turned sharp. Malik's lips trembled, as he glanced from his father to Laverne. She was showing me how to talk to Mama. Darius's breath caught. His world tilted. Make sure you subscribe now and comment where you're watching from, because what happened next in that library didn't just test Darius's pride. It cracked open secrets and grief he thought he buried for good. And let me warn you, Miss Laverne wasn't about to back down. Darius's question hung in the air like thunder. What exactly is going on here? The library, usually his quiet sanctuary, now felt like a courtroom. Malik was the defendant, Miss Laverne the witness, and Darius the judge with a verdict already forming in his mind. Malik's chest rose and fell quickly, his small hands fidgeting as though he was caught doing something forbidden. She was showing me how to talk to Mama, the boy whispered. Darius's throat tightened. That word, Mama, it had been locked away for years. He had avoided it, dodged it, buried it under flights and contracts. And now here it was, pulled from his son's lips like a wound ripped open. Laverne straightened her back, her face calm but firm. He was asking questions, Mr. Whitfield. Questions a boy shouldn't cry alone about. Her voice wasn't trembling. If anything, it was steady. Too steady. Like she had no fear of him, of his money, his power, his rage. Darius clenched his jaw. Who was this woman to step into his family's grief? She was hired to clean, not to reach into the most sacred part of his son's soul. Malik, Darius said sharply, go upstairs, now. The boy flinched. His eyes darted to Laverne, silently begging her to protect him, but her hand only squeezed his shoulder once before releasing. Go on, baby, she said softly. Malik hesitated, tears still fresh on his cheeks, then rushed toward the stairs. His small feet pounded against the polished steps until the sound disappeared. Now it was just Darius and Laverne. Do you realize what you've done? Darius hissed. His voice was low, but the anger inside it shook the air. You had no right to bring up his mother. None. Laverne's gaze held his. And what right do you have to ignore that boy's pain? The words stung. For years, no one had dared challenge him. Employees obeyed, partners respected, competitors feared. Yet here was his maid, staring him down like she saw through his whole empire. Now let me ask you this. If someone you trusted to work in your home went beyond their role and touched something that personal, how would you react? Would you see it as love or overstepping? Type love or overstepping in the comments. I want to know where you stand. Darius took a step closer, his shadow falling over her. You are paid to keep this house in order, not to meddle in wounds you don't understand. But she didn't shrink back. With all due respect, sir, wounds don't heal when you cover them up. They get worse. Darius's chest tightened. He wanted to fire her on the spot. He wanted to shout until his anger drowned out her voice. But something in her tone, something in her eyes, stopped him. This wasn't a maid trying to be bold. This was a woman speaking from experience. And for the first time in years, Darius felt a crack in his pride. But he covered it quickly, forcing his voice cold again. Stay in your lane, Miss Laverne. Do your job. Nothing more. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't answer, and in that silence, the tension was louder than words. That night, Darius barely slept. The image of Malik crying, Laverne kneeling beside him, haunted him. He tried to justify his anger, tried to believe she was wrong. But deep down, a voice gnawed at him. Maybe she wasn't wrong. Maybe he was. By morning, the mansion buzzed with its usual rhythm, staff moving quietly, breakfast smells wafting from the kitchen, Malik's footsteps rushing down the stairs. But beneath that routine, the tension from the night before still lingered. Darius sat at the long dining table, coffee steaming in front of him. He hadn't touched it. His eyes were locked on Laverne, who moved calmly around the room, setting plates as though nothing unusual had happened. That calmness irritated him more than anything. Finally, he spoke. "We need to talk." She looked at him evenly. "Then let's." The staff glanced nervously at each other, then disappeared, leaving the two of them alone. "You crossed a line last night," Darius said, his voice clipped, "talking to Malik about his mother, teaching him things I never approved." Laverne didn't flinch. "That boy cries himself to sleep, Mr. Whitfield. He needs more than toys and tutors. He needs somebody to listen." Her words hit hard, but Darius refused to show it. He leaned forward. "You don't get to decide what my son needs. You're here to cook and clean. Nothing more. Now let me bring you in for a second. Do you think she should have stayed in her role? Or do you believe love has no job description? Drop your thoughts below. I want to see how divided we are on this." Laverne crossed her arms. "I ain't here to replace his mama, but I won't ignore his cries either. You can pay me to sweep your floors, but you can't pay me to close my ears." The audacity of her words lit a fire in Darius's chest. "You talk like you know what it's like to lose. You don't." Her eyes darkened. "Don't I?" Darius froze. That was the first crack. She stepped closer, her voice steady, but trembling at the edges. "You think you're the only one who buried someone too soon? You think grief only lives in this house?" Darius swallowed hard, his anger faltering for a moment. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone softer now. Her hands shook slightly, but her eyes never left his. "Sit down," she said quietly. "Since you came home unannounced, you might as well hear the truth I've been carrying." The room felt heavier than marble could explain. Darius lowered himself into his chair, a storm of emotions swirling: anger, pride, confusion, curiosity. Who was this woman really? And what secret had she been holding all this time? The air inside that dining room was heavy, like the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. Laverne stood with her back straight, her hands clasped in front of her apron, eyes fixed on Darius like she was about to deliver a sermon. "Mr. Whitfield," she began slowly, "you think I don't know loss, but I do." Darius tilted his head, his jaw tight. "Go on." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I had a son once. His name was Andre. Bright smile, curious eyes, just like Malik." Her voice trembled on the name, but she pressed on. "One night, he went out with some friends. Wrong place, wrong time. Gunshots rang out on that corner, and just like that..." She snapped her fingers softly. "My boy was gone." The room fell silent. Darius's breath caught. He hadn't expected this. He had assumed Laverne's strength came from years of hard work, not from a wound carved into her heart. She continued, her tone fierce now. "You bury a child, Mr. Whitfield, and you learn something. You learn how grief eats you alive if you don't face it. I didn't want to talk about it either. I shut people out. I thought silence would protect me." Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. "But silence only made it worse. It almost swallowed me whole. Now let me ask you, listeners, how many of you know that kind of silence? The kind where the hurt never speaks, but it still screams at night? If you've ever carried that weight, drop a heart in the comments. Let's see how many of us been there." Darius stared at her, his chest tightening. For years he had convinced himself he was doing the right thing by keeping Jasmine's memory locked away. But now, standing in front of him, was living proof of what silence could do. Laverne stepped closer, her voice lowering but growing sharper. "That boy of yours? He's not just crying for his mama, he's crying for you, and every time you shut him down, you teaching him that pain ain't welcome in this house. That's dangerous, Mr. Whitfield. More dangerous than any street corner." Darius clenched his fists. He wanted to argue, to push back, to remind her of her place. But the truth in her words cut too deep. "You think I don't care about my son?" he asked, his voice rough. "I think you love him so much you can't stand to face his pain," she replied, "because if you face his, you'll have to face your own." Her words landed like a punch. "Now, let me throw this at you. If you were in Darius's shoes, would you humble yourself and listen, or would you fire her on the spot for speaking out of turn? Type listen or fire. I want to know who's riding with which side." The clock ticked loudly in the background, each second stretching. Darius finally pushed back from the table, standing tall. "You don't know me, Miss Laverne," he said coldly. "You don't know the choices I've had to make." Her chin lifted. "Then let me. If you let me stand beside Malik, I can help him carry what you won't. But if you push me out, that boy's gonna break under the weight." The words echoed. For the first time, Darius saw her not as the maid, but as a woman who had already walked through fire. And just like that, the power shifted. Because in that moment, Laverne wasn't just speaking to Darius. She was speaking to every wound he'd locked away, every tear he never allowed himself to shed. What Darius does next will decide not only Malik's future, but his own, because if pride wins, this house may never recover. The next morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Whitfield mansion. Everything looked perfect. White marble floors polished, breakfast laid out neatly, silence hanging in the air like a well-kept secret. But underneath the surface, nothing was perfect. Darius sat at the table, staring at his untouched plate. He had spent most of the night pacing his study, replaying Laverne's words. Pride told him to fire her. Guilt told him she was right. Then came the sound of small footsteps. Malik padded into the dining room, still in his pajamas, eyes heavy from crying the night before. He sat across from his father and pushed around a piece of toast. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Malik looked up. "Dad, why don't you ever talk about Mom?" The question sliced through the air sharper than any knife. Darius froze. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to answer. "Because it hurts, son, and I don't want you to hurt more than you already do." Malik frowned. "But I already hurt. And Miss Laverne says, if you don't talk about the people you lose, you forget them. Do you want me to forget her?" The boy's voice cracked. "Now let me ask you, the listener, what would you do if your child asked you that? Would you open up or shut down? Comment. Open if you'd tell the truth, or shut if you'd lock it away." Darius's chest ached. He had thought silence was protecting Malik, but here was his son asking if silence meant erasing his mother. "I don't want you to forget her," Darius said softly. "Then why don't you tell me about her?" Malik pressed, tears brimming. "I don't even remember what her laugh sounded like, or her favorite song, or the way she used to hold my hand." His voice broke completely. "You remember all that, but you keep it to yourself." Darius's eyes stung. The truth was brutal. His son was right. He had memories locked up like treasures in a vault, but by hoarding them, he was starving Malik of the very thing he needed most: connection. Before Darius could reply, Laverne stepped into the room quietly with a tray. She hadn't meant to overhear, but the boy's words were impossible to ignore. She set the tray down and said gently, "Children don't just need food for the body, Mr. Whitfield. They need food for the soul too." Malik looked at his dad. "So will you tell me? Just one story about her?" The silence stretched, and then Darius spoke. "Your mom. She loved jazz. Whenever I'd come home late from work, She'd put on Miles Davis and dance around the living room until I couldn't help but laugh. Malik's lips curled into a shaky smile. Really? Really, Darius said, his voice cracking. She'd grab your little hands and spin you around until you got dizzy. Malik laughed through tears and Laverne's eyes softened. For the first time in years, Darius felt the weight lift, just a little. But here's where things twist. As healing as that moment was, Darius's pride still lingered. Sharing one memory was one thing. Opening the floodgates? That terrified him. And so, when Malik asked for another story, Darius stood. That's enough for now. The boy's face fell. Now, let me pull you in. Was Darius protecting himself, or was he failing his son again? Drop your thoughts. Selfish or understandable? That night, Malik went to bed quietly, but Laverne saw the disappointment in his eyes, and in her heart, she knew. If Darius didn't step up soon, the boy might lose faith in him completely, and when a child loses faith in a parent, that wound runs deeper than money can ever fix. Malik isn't done asking questions, and next time he won't just ask. He'll challenge his father outright. 2 days later, the tension in the house had only grown. Darius buried himself in phone calls and contracts, pretending nothing had changed. But Malik wasn't pretending. The boy grew quiet, distant even at school. His teachers called to say he wasn't focusing. Laverne noticed too. His laughter was missing, replaced by silence. One evening, as Darius sat in his study scrolling through reports, the door creaked open. Malik walked in holding something in his hands, an old framed photo of Jasmine, dust clinging to the glass. He set it on his father's desk. Dad, we need to talk. Darius glanced up, startled by the seriousness in his son's voice. About what? About Mom, Malik said firmly, and about us. The boy crossed his arms, a mirror of his father's stubbornness. If you don't start talking to me about her, I'm going to keep going to Miss Laverne instead. Darius stiffened. Don't you dare. She listens. Malik cut him off, his voice loud and raw. She tells me it's okay to miss Mom. She teaches me how to pray for her. She doesn't act like I'm wrong for feeling things. Now let me ask you viewers, what would sting more, your child saying they needed someone else or your child saying they didn't need you at all? Comment someone else or no one. Darius slammed his hand on the desk. I am your father. You don't go to her for that. You come to me. Malik's eyes welled up. But I can't come to you. You don't talk. You don't listen. You just work, and then act like nothing's wrong. Well, everything's wrong. His words cracked through the room like thunder. Laverne appeared in the doorway, alarmed by the shouting. She started to speak, but Malik lifted a hand to stop her. No, this is between me and him. The courage in his small voice stunned them both. Malik turned back to his father. I need you, Dad. Not the money, not the house, not the cars, you. If you can't give me that, then... His voice shook, but he held steady. Then maybe you shouldn't be the one raising me. The words dropped like a hammer. Now pause for a second. Viewers, imagine hearing that from your child. Would it break you or wake you up? Comment break or wake. Darius's chest burned. He had faced hostile investors, courtroom battles, even near bankruptcy. None of it compared to this moment, his own son questioning his place as a father. The anger drained from his face, leaving only fear. Malik, don't say that. Then show me you care, Malik whispered. The boy's tears finally spilled over, but his words carried a weight far beyond his years. Laverne stepped in then, her voice steady but firm. Mr. Whitfield, he's not giving you attitude. He's giving you truth. And you better listen. Before that boy builds walls, you'll never climb over. Darius sank back into his chair, shaken to his core. For the first time he realized, Malik wasn't asking anymore. He was demanding, and this demand could either break their bond forever or rebuild it stronger than before. Will Darius humble himself, or will his pride push his son even further away? The mansion felt colder that night, not because of the air, but because of the silence. Malik had shut himself in his room, refusing dinner. Darius paced the hallways like a ghost, replaying his son's ultimatum over and over. "Maybe you shouldn't be the one raising me." Those words stabbed deeper than any insult Darius had ever faced in the boardroom. But instead of softening, his pride boiled. He told himself, "I'm the father, I built this life. Nobody tells me how to raise my son." But deep down, fear whispered, "What if I'm failing him?" Around midnight, Darius walked past Malik's room. The door was cracked open. He peeked inside and froze. There was Malik, curled up on his bed, whispering into the darkness. At first, Darius thought he was talking to himself, but then he realized he was praying. "God, I don't know what to do. Dad doesn't listen. I just want Mom back." His small shoulders shook. "Please don't let me lose him too." The boy's words cut Darius to pieces. "Now, tell me, if you overheard your child praying that they don't lose you, would it humble you, or would you still fight to stay in control? Type humble or control." Darius's throat tightened. He wanted to rush in, hold his son, promise he'd never leave. But pride chained him in the hallway. He backed away silently, his chest burning with shame. The next morning, Malik barely spoke at breakfast. Laverne tried to lighten the mood, humming softly, but the boy's eyes stayed downcast. Finally, she set her spoon down. "Mr. Whitfield, you need to hear something." Darius looked up sharply. "Not now." "Yes, now," she said firmly. "I've worked in homes where fathers hid behind money, and I've seen what it does to children. They grow up thinking love is something you buy. But Malik is telling you plain he doesn't want your money. He wants you." Her words stung like salt on an open wound. Darius slammed his fork down. "You think you can walk into my house and lecture me? You're the help, Laverne, don't forget that." The room went dead quiet. Malik stared at him with wide, hurt eyes. Laverne didn't flinch. She rose slowly, her voice calm but firm. "No, Mr. Whitfield, I'm not just the help. I'm the only one in this house listening to your son." Viewers, pause here. Do you think Darius went too far by putting her in her place, or do you think he's just lashing out in fear? Drop too far or fear. Malik shoved back his chair, tears spilling. "You don't get it, Dad. She's not trying to replace Mom. She's just trying to help. But you..." His voice cracked. "You're the one acting like she never existed." The boy stormed off, his small footsteps echoing up the stairs. Darius sat frozen, anger and guilt battling inside him. Later that night, Darius poured himself a glass of whiskey, staring at Jasmine's photo on his desk. For the first time, he whispered, "Am I losing him, Jazz?" His hand trembled. "I don't know how to do this without you." It was the first confession he'd made in years, but no one was there to hear it. The breaking point had come, and soon, Darius would face a truth even his millions couldn't shield him from. The next day, tension spilled beyond the walls of the mansion. At school, Malik got into a fight. When Darius was called to pick him up, he walked into the principal's office to find his son sitting with a split lip, eyes blazing with anger. "He shoved another student," the principal explained. When asked why, Malik said the boy made fun of him for not having a mum. The words hit Darius like a truck. On the drive home, Darius kept stealing glances at Malik in the rearview mirror. The boy sat with arms crossed, staring out the window, jaw clenched tight. Finally, Darius spoke. "Son, is this really about what that kid said? Or is it about me?" Malik didn't turn. "Both," The single word cut deeper than a sentence ever could. Now tell me, listeners, what hurts worse? When your child is angry at the world, or when they're angry at you? Comment, world, or you. Back at the mansion, Laverne met them at the door. When she saw Malik's face, her expression hardened. What happened? Darius sighed. He got into a fight. Malik snapped, "Don't talk like I'm not here." The boy brushed past them both and ran upstairs. Darius dropped onto the sofa, rubbing his temples. "I'm losing him, Laverne." She sat across from him, her voice steady. "You're not losing him. You're pushing him. There's a difference, and you still got time to turn around." He looked up, eyes red. "How?" "Tell me how, because I don't know anymore." Laverne leaned forward. "Start by admitting you're hurting too. Stop hiding behind work. Stop hiding behind pride. Let that boy see that his daddy is human. That's the only way he'll trust you again." Darius swallowed hard. Vulnerability had never been his strong suit. In business, showing weakness was fatal. But here, in his own home, that same armor was killing the bond with his son. Later that evening, Malik came downstairs quietly, holding Jasmine's photo again. He set it on the coffee table and whispered, "I don't want to fight anymore, Dad. I just want to feel like she's still with us." Darius's heart broke all over again. He reached out slowly, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "She is with us, and I should have told you that every day." Malik looked up, eyes filled with tears. "Then why didn't you?" The question hung heavy, demanding an answer he wasn't ready to give. "Now let me ask you, would you rather face your child's hard questions, or keep pretending until they stop asking? Comment, face it, or pretend?" The silence stretched. Finally, Darius whispered, "Because I was scared. Scared that talking about her would break me. But I see now. Not talking about her is breaking you." Malik's lip trembled, but he didn't pull away. For the first time in years, father and son sat side by side. No work, no distractions, just grief laid bare. Laverne, watching from the kitchen doorway, wiped her eyes quietly. For the first time, she believed healing might be possible. But as soon as cracks begin to heal, an unexpected discovery about Laverne's past threatens to change everything. The house was quieter now, but it wasn't peace. It was exhaustion. Darius and Malik had shed tears in the living room the night before. It was the first step, but Darius knew healing didn't come in a single night. And yet, even as he tried to focus on Malik, his thoughts kept circling back to the maid who had dared to stand up to him. Miss Laverne. He had always known her as just that, the woman who cleaned, who hummed hymns while folding sheets, who stayed in the background. But lately she had become more than that. She was the one his son trusted, the one who carried authority that, in some ways, rivaled his own. And something about her strength bothered him, not in a threatening way, but in a curious one. Who was she really? That night, while Malik was asleep, Darius sat in his office with a glass of bourbon and his laptop. He typed in her name, Laverne Jacobs. At first, nothing unusual came up. Public records, addresses, employment histories. But then, buried in an old file from over a decade ago, he found it. Laverne wasn't just a maid. She had once been a licensed teacher, with honors, degrees from respected universities, newspaper clippings of her winning Teacher of the Year, testimonials from parents praising her for changing their children's lives. Darius leaned back in his chair, stunned. Now let me ask you, viewers, if you found out someone working in your house was far more qualified than their role suggested, would you confront them, or would you stay silent and wait for answers? Comment, confront, or wait? Why would a woman with that kind of background choose to scrub floors for a living? The question gnawed at him, and the answer came sooner than he expected. The next morning, as Laverne polished the silverware, Darius walked into the kitchen. He set his phone on the counter, showing her one of the old articles he had pulled up. "You were a teacher," he said flatly. Laverne froze, her hand tightening around the cloth. She looked at him carefully, as if weighing whether to answer. "Yes," she finally said. "Why'd you quit?" His voice wasn't angry, just sharp. Her lips pressed together. "I didn't quit. I walked away." Darius frowned. "There's a difference." "Yes." She set down the cloth and faced him fully. "After my boy died, I couldn't go back into a classroom. Every child's face reminded me of him. Every desk felt empty without him, so I left." Her eyes glistened, but her voice stayed steady. "I needed work that didn't demand my heart. Cleaning houses was safer." Listeners, pause here. Does that make sense to you? Could grief really push someone to bury their own talent like that? Comment yes if you understand, or no if you think she wasted her gift. Darius crossed his arms, conflicted. "So you threw away everything? All those kids you inspired, you just walked out?" Laverne's voice sharpened. "Don't you dare judge me, Mr. Whitfield. You buried yourself in boardrooms after your wife passed. You left Malik to nannies and maids, so tell me, how's that different from me scrubbing floors instead of teaching?" Her words hit like a slap. He swallowed hard, unable to respond. Because she was right. Laverne softened slightly. "The only reason I took this job was Malik. When I saw him, I saw the chance to give a child what I couldn't give my own. That's all." Darius stared at her, the weight of her truth pressing down on him. For the first time, he realized she hadn't been trying to undermine him. She had been trying to save his son. Now here's the twist. Most men in Darius's position would have fired her out of pride, but instead, something inside him shifted. He asked quietly, Do you think you could teach again? Not in a school, just here. For Malik." Laverne blinked. "You want me to tutor him?" "I want you to help him heal," Darius admitted. "You've done more for him in a few weeks than I have in years. But if you stay, it has to be as more than a maid." Her eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. "I'll stay," she said, "but only if you make a promise too." "What promise?" "That you don't keep hiding behind work. Malik doesn't just need me. He needs his father. So if I do this, you show up." Darius hesitated. This was a deal that would demand everything he had avoided for years. Finally, he nodded. "Deal." For the first time, Darius opened the door to partnership instead of pride. But could he actually keep his promise, or would old habits drag him back? The deal had been made, but for Darius, it felt less like a deal and more like a dare. Could he really keep his word? Could he set aside work, pride, and fear long enough to show up for his son? The next morning gave him his first test. Darius usually left the mansion before sunrise, briefcase in hand, calls already buzzing on his phone. But this time, when Malik came downstairs for breakfast, he found his father sitting at the table. No tie, no laptop, just a cup of coffee. Malik froze, suspicious. "You're still here?" Darius smiled faintly. "Yeah, thought I'd try something new." Laverne glanced between them, hiding a small smile. She had been humming softly again, and for once the tune didn't feel like background noise. It felt like the start of something. "Now, let me ask you, audience, if your parent who was always absent suddenly started showing up, would you trust it right away, or would you wait and see if it lasted?" Type trust or wait. After breakfast, Laverne sat Malik at the dining room table with books and notebooks spread out. "We're going to start simple," she told him. "A little math, a little reading, and a lot of talking. Malik groaned. Talking? Yes, talking, she said with a smirk. Because learning isn't just about numbers. It's about listening, asking questions and figuring out what's in here. She tapped his chest gently. Darius lingered nearby, watching. At first, he felt out of place, like a guest in his own home. But when Malik stumbled over a word, Laverne gave Darius a subtle nod. He stepped forward, his voice soft. Son, your mum used to read that story to you when you were little. Remember how she'd always pause and make you guess the next word? Malik blinked, surprised. You remember that? Of course I do, Darius said. I was listening, even when it looked like I wasn't. For the first time in weeks, Malik smiled at him. It was small, but it was real. Laverne leaned back slightly, letting the moment breathe. She wasn't just teaching Malik, she was teaching Darius how to show up. But here's the thing, folks. Change never comes easy. That afternoon, Darius's phone rang. His company was facing a crisis with an overseas deal. His instinct screamed at him to grab his keys, rush to the office, and put out the fire. He stood in the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, sweat beading on his forehead. Just this once, he thought. One quick meeting. He'll never know. But then he looked through the doorway. Malik was at the table, laughing as Laverne guided him through a puzzle. The sound was light, unguarded. The kind of laugh he hadn't heard since Jasmine was alive. Darius made his choice. He ended the call. Listeners, be honest. Would you have hung up the phone or would you have taken that meeting? Comment, hang up or meeting. That night, Malik knocked softly on Darius's office door. Dad? Darius looked up from his paperwork. Yeah? Malik hesitated. Thanks for staying today. The boy's words were simple, but to Darius they felt like a medal pinned to his chest. Always, son, he said, his voice thick. Always. In the kitchen, Laverne washed dishes, smiling to herself. She had seen enough families fall apart to know this one was different. Darius was trying. Malik was opening up. The house didn't feel like a tomb anymore. But deep in her heart she also knew healing was a process. Healing. And even in new beginnings, old shadows had a way of creeping back. Just as the Whitfield home begins to settle, news from the outside world threatens to pull Darius back into the life he's trying to leave behind. For 2 weeks, the mansion felt alive. Malik's laughter bounced through the halls, Laverne's voice carried during lessons, and Darius, shockingly, was part of it all. He even learned to make breakfast pancakes, though Malik swore they were burnt on purpose. But peace has a way of making noise louder when it finally shatters. It was a Thursday afternoon when Darius's phone rang again. This time, it wasn't just a small deal or a minor hiccup. It was the chairman of his board, voice sharp and urgent. We've got a crisis. Investors are threatening to pull out unless you show up in person. If you don't handle this, Darius, everything you've built could collapse. The words hit like gunfire. Collapse. Everything he built. Darius's chest tightened. He had spent years clawing his way from Atlanta's West End to the top floors of glass skyscrapers. Could he really throw it all away? Now let me put this to you. What would you do? Stay home with your child or save the empire you've worked your whole life for? Drop home or empire in the comments. That evening, Laverne noticed him pacing the hallway. Something's wrong, she said plainly. He avoided her eyes. It's nothing. You lying? She said, wiping her hands on her apron. What's the call about? Darius clenched his jaw. Work. A deal. If I don't show up, I lose everything. Everything? She asked quietly. Or just the money? The question pierced him, but he wasn't ready for the answer. Malik wandered in, holding a basketball. "Dad, want to shoot some hoops outside?" Darius's lips parted. He looked at his son's eager eyes, then back at his buzzing phone. Two worlds pulling at him. He forced a smile. "Maybe tomorrow, son. I've got things." Malik's face fell, the spark fading as quickly as it appeared. He turned away without a word. Darius's stomach twisted. Let's pause here, listeners. Have you ever promised someone you love that you'd change, only to find yourself slipping back into old patterns? That guilt, that fear, it eats at you. Later that night, Darius stood in his office, staring at the framed photo of Jasmine. Her smile seemed to accuse him. "You said you'd be better. You said you'd put Malik first," he whispered to the empty room. "How do I balance both? How?" A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Laverne stepped inside. "You're at a crossroads," she said, "and crossroads don't wait forever." He sighed. "If I don't go back to work, I could lose the company." "And if you do," she said gently, "you could lose your son." That night, sleep refused to come. His mind was a battlefield. Visions of skyscrapers falling apart on one side, Malik's tear-streaked face on the other. By morning, he had made a choice. He walked downstairs, suitcase in hand. Malik sat at the breakfast table, his spoon frozen mid-air. "You're leaving?" Malik whispered. "Just for a few days," Darius said, voice heavy. "I'll be back before you know it." The boy's eyes hardened, not with sadness, but with something sharper, disappointment. "Don't bother," Malik muttered, pushing his chair back. The sound of footsteps racing upstairs stabbed Darius deeper than any boardroom insult ever could. Audience, tell me honestly, was Darius wrong for leaving, or was he just doing what he had to? Comment wrong or had to? As the Escalade pulled away from the mansion, Darius glanced out the tinted window. Laverne stood on the steps, arms folded, expression unreadable. He felt the weight of her stare like a warning. This choice has consequences. Darius thinks he's securing his empire, but what he doesn't know is that his absence will stir up the very storm he feared most. The mansion had felt warm for the first time in years, but the moment Darius's car disappeared down the driveway, the air inside shifted. Malik sat at the kitchen table, arms crossed, refusing to eat the breakfast Laverne placed in front of him. "You'll get hungry later," she said softly. "I'm not hungry," Malik snapped. "He said he wouldn't leave again." Laverne sighed, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Baby, sometimes adults make promises they can't keep." Malik glared at her. "You're defending him?" "I'm just telling you the truth. The truth is he cares more about money than me." The words landed heavy. Laverne knew that anger. She had seen it before, felt it before, when her own son looked at her the same way, right before his life was cut short. Audience, tell me, have you ever felt like someone chose work or money over you? Drop yes if you've lived it, no if not. Days stretched long. Malik avoided the library, avoided the dining room, even avoided Laverne. He spent hours locked in his room, the sound of video games blasting through the walls. When she knocked, he barely answered. When she cooked, he barely touched the food. Laverne carried on with chores, but the silence gnawed at her. She was losing him. Meanwhile, Darius sat in boardrooms half a world away, face lit by fluorescent lights, voice echoing over conference calls. The deals were tense, but he won them. His empire was safe, for now. But every victory felt hollow. Each night when he returned to his hotel suite, he found himself scrolling through old photos of Malik and Jasmine, his heart twisting tighter. He dialed home once, but Malik didn't pick up. Another time he called again, and Laverne answered. "How is he?" Darius asked. "Hurting," she replied simply. "And the longer you're gone, the deeper that hurt gets." He pinched the bridge of his nose. "I'm doing this for him, for us." "Then you better pray he believes that when you come back." Let me ask you all, do you think a child cares about the size of your bank account or about you showing up when it matters? Comment bank or show up? By the end of the week, Malik's anger had sharpened into something more dangerous: apathy. He skipped tutoring sessions, ignored homework, and when Laverne tried to guide him, he shrugged her off. "You ain't my mum," he muttered one evening. "You can't tell me what to do." The words sliced deeper than he knew. Laverne set the book down, her hands trembling. For years, she had buried the guilt of not being there for her son the night he died. Now, hearing Malik's rejection brought all that pain rushing back. "You're right," she whispered. "I ain't your mum, but I'm here, and I care, more than you know." Malik turned away, pretending not to hear, but his eyes brimmed with tears he refused to shed. Back overseas, Darius stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the city skyline. His phone buzzed with another congratulatory text from a partner. He should have felt triumphant. Instead, all he felt was the emptiness of being 1,000 miles away from the only person who mattered. He whispered into the glass, as if Malik could somehow hear him. "Son, I'm coming back. I promise." But when he finally boarded the jet home, he had no idea how much damage had been done in his absence. By the time Darius steps through his mansion doors again, Malik may no longer be the same boy he left behind. The black Escalade rolled up the long driveway, tires crunching against the gravel. Darius's chest tightened as the mansion came into view. For weeks, he'd dreamed of this return, of stepping inside to laughter and forgiveness. But as the doors swung open, the silence that greeted him was deafening. His suitcase felt heavier than it should. In the kitchen, Laverne was stirring a pot of stew. She didn't rush to greet him. She didn't even smile. She just looked at him, steady, tired, almost disappointed. "You came back," she said flatly. "I told you I would." "Mm-hmm." She turned back to the stove. "But the question is, what did you leave behind while you was gone?" Her words stung more than he wanted to admit. Malik appeared in the doorway, basketball tucked under his arm. His eyes flicked to his father, then away, like he was looking at a stranger. "Hey, champ," Darius said, forcing a smile. Malik shrugged. "I was about to shoot hoops. Mind if I join?" The boy's response was cold and sharp. "You missed your chance." And just like that, he walked outside. Audience, let me ask you, if you were Malik, would you forgive your father right away? Or would you make him prove he's serious this time? Type forgive or prove. Darius followed him out to the driveway. Malik bounced the ball hard against the concrete, each thud like a drumbeat of resentment. "Malik, I know I let you down." The boy stopped dribbling, eyes blazing. "You said you wouldn't leave again, you promised, and you lied." Darius's throat tightened. "I had to take care of business." "You always gotta take care of business," Malik shouted. "What about me? Don't I matter?" The words ripped through Darius's chest like glass. He reached out, but Malik stepped back. "I don't need you," the boy muttered. "Miss Laverne takes better care of me anyway." Inside, Laverne had been watching through the kitchen window. The scene was too familiar. Her son, years ago, looking at her with the same pain. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest. When Darius came back inside, shoulders slumped, she didn't spare him. "You think money makes you a father?" she said quietly. "It don't. Being there does." "I'm trying," he whispered. Trying ain't enough. That boy is slipping away, and if you keep putting yourself first, one day he won't come back. Let me turn this to you. Do you think Laverne's being too hard, or is she saying what Darius needs to hear? Comment too hard or truth. That night, the mansion felt heavy again. Malik shut himself in his room, refusing to talk. Laverne cleaned in silence, her hymns replaced by the quiet scrape of dishes. Darius sat alone in the library, head in his hands. The same room where it all began, the night he caught Laverne praying with his son, now felt like a courtroom where his failures were laid bare. He whispered into the stillness, "Jasmine, I don't know what I'm doing. Tell me how to fix this." For the first time in years, tears slid down his cheeks. Hours later, a soft sound broke the silence. The door creaked open. Malik stood there, arms crossed, eyes red. "Are you crying?" he asked. Darius wiped his face quickly. "Yeah, guess I am." Malik hesitated, his voice barely above a whisper. "I cry too. About Mom. Almost every night." The honesty cracked something open. Darius rose slowly, his voice unsteady. Maybe we could cry together, and pray together, like you and Miss Laverne did." Malik's lip quivered. For the first time in weeks, he didn't pull away. The walls between father and son are finally breaking. But will Darius truly change? Or is this just another moment he can't hold on to? The next morning, the mansion sounded different. Not from laughter, not from music, but from the soft murmur of voices in the library. Darius sat on the rug with Malik beside him. Between them lay a photo of Jasmine, framed and worn. For the first time since her passing, they spoke openly about her smile, the way she danced in the kitchen, the lullabies she used to sing. Malik's tears flowed freely. This time, Darius didn't tell him to be strong. He cried with him, their grief finally shared instead of buried. Listeners, be honest. If someone you love passed too soon, would you rather keep the memories hidden, or speak them aloud and keep them alive? Comment hide or speak. Later, Laverne peeked in quietly, her heart swelling at the sight. She had prayed for this, for father and son to stop standing on opposite sides of their pain and finally meet in the middle. Darius noticed her in the doorway. He stood, walked over, and spoke with a humility he rarely showed. "Miss Laverne," he said, voice thick, "I owe you more than I can ever repay. You stepped in where I failed. You gave Malik what I couldn't." She shook her head. "I didn't replace you. I just held him steady till you found your way back." But Darius pressed on. "I don't want you here as just staff anymore. I want you here as family. Malik needs you. I need you. Stay, not as a maid, but as his guide, his teacher, his second mother." Her lips trembled. "You mean that?" He nodded. "With everything in me." Have you ever had someone step into your life and fill a role you didn't even know you needed? Drop yes if you have. Weeks passed, and slowly the mansion transformed. Breakfasts were no longer rushed or silent. They were messy, filled with laughter, spilled juice, and playful arguments about who made better pancakes. Evenings in the library turned into lessons not just about math or reading, but about life, where Malik asked hard questions, and both adults gave honest answers. And sometimes late at night, when the world outside was quiet, Darius joined Laverne and Malik in prayer. His voice was shaky at first, but each time it grew stronger. The empire outside the mansion still demanded him, but for the first time, he learned the power of saying no. Deals could wait. His son couldn't. One Saturday afternoon, Malik and Darius played basketball in the driveway. Sweat dripped, sneakers squeaked, and for the first time, Darius let himself lose on purpose. Malik laughed so hard he nearly dropped the ball. "You're getting old, Dad," he teased. "Old but still handsome," Darius shot back, grinning. From the porch, Laverne watched with folded arms, humming softly. This time, it wasn't a hymn of sorrow. It was a tune of peace. "Now let me ask you, family, do you believe people can truly change, or do they just learn to hide their flaws better? Comment change or hide." That evening, they gathered for dinner at the long dining table. But instead of Darius at one end and Malik at the other, they sat close together. Plates passed, jokes cracked, memories shared. For the first time in years, the house felt like home. Darius raised his glass of water. "To second chances," he said. Malik lifted his cup of juice. "To family." And Laverne, her eyes glistening, added softly, "To healing." They clinked their glasses together, sealing not just a moment, but a new chapter in their lives. As the night wound down, Darius tucked Malik into bed, a task he once left to others. "Dad?" Malik whispered. "Yeah, son." "Promise me one thing. Anything. Don't leave again." Darius bent down, kissed his forehead, and said with quiet certainty, "Never." Final message to the audience. We've all seen stories where money buys everything, except love, except time, except healing. But in this story, wealth didn't save the Whitfields. What saved them was presence, honesty, and the courage to face pain together. So I'll ask you one last time. If you were in Darius's shoes, what would you have chosen? The boardroom or the boy? And if this story touched you, don't just scroll away. Subscribe so you're here when the next story drops, because the lessons waiting there might be the ones you need most.